In my work, when you do the past life regressions, in order to do it correctly, you must take the person through the death experience. And a lot of hypnosis classes say, no, no, don't touch that, it's dangerous. It is not, because I've done thousands and thousands of people, and I've had them die in every way imaginable you could think of.
I'm Sally Knobb. This is Miracles of Consciousness Radio. That is Dolores Cannon talking about life after death. Let's roll the video. Dolores Cannon, she was a renowned hypnotherapist and developed the QHHT, or quantum healing hypnosis technique. And I am one of their practitioners. Now, what is so interesting in this particular video we're going to be touching on is what she learned about life after death. And through her past life regressions over 40 years, there was a common thread that went through many of them. And I will tell you about my own experiences with people going through the death experience. It's quite interesting, actually. Now, we're going to be touching on a few concepts. The first concept, and I'm just going to be checking up my notes because I want to keep this as close to my notes as possible, is transitioning after death. Now, in most cases, what she would describe is that when the body is ready to transition, it begins to feel very, very cold, and then the person just floats out of the body. Now, this is often the case unless somebody dies tragically. That's something entirely different, but not as scary as it might appear. We'll get into that probably in some other videos coming up. However, you get up, as she says, it's like getting up out of one chair and moving over to the other. She says there's no pain in the death process and explains that it's peaceful. And we have found that is true here in my own practice, that most of the time when people experience it, it's not scary, it is peaceful, and it actually feels quite good. So as she talks about, I mean, this is kind of the common thread. Now, there's going to be variations of this theme, but in most cases, people will rise up out of the bed. Sometimes they'll turn and look at themselves, and they won't even recognize themselves. Even though they've seen themselves in the mirror, they look very different when they're dead and they're looking down at the body, mainly because they're coming from, for the first time, a point of view outside the body. They're looking down at something as if they're still in their body, but they're not. They are outside their body. So it is quite peaceful and is a common thread. Now, the other thing that she talks about are the afterlife realms, and there are different levels. Depending on where you are, quote, vibrating at in your frequency, will determine which will be the better match for you. Now, we've talked about this in prior videos. Is there a hell? Well, if you are convinced there is a hell, because in the quantum field, you can create whatever you want. If your vibration is very low, you may actually have a hellish experience, especially if you're someone who believes in the physical presence of a fiery space with a devil and pitchfork. If you feel that you are deserving of that, if you feel shame, you might be above that, but you are still in a vibrational place where there's almost like a limbo. So there's different levels. It's almost, you have to think of it like a radio wave. You know, if you're trying to tune into a high frequency and your low frequency, your AM, you'll never turn into the higher frequencies. I hope that makes sense. So this is what she's talking about. And how you feel that is in your daily emotions. Where are you sitting on average? Are you feeling down most days? Or are you feeling happier most days? That is kind of your inner compass. And then, of course, what is your inner belief system? For those people who are very religious and feel that they've done a good job, but they've suffered, they can still transition into the higher realms because that is their expectation. You will gravitate toward the frequency that will help you ease in to the other side. Now, This is sort of what Dolores Cannon will touch on. She touched on that the afterlife is multi-dimensions. And that's what we just talked about, different frequencies. And that this is where souls reside according to their vibrational frequency. That's in the notes. That's funny. And also the spiritual development. So if you are somebody who's come into this world to do naughty and have just focused on your own self-service and you've taken advantage of others, your frequency is going to be quite low. Your spiritual awareness is not as big and as broad. And you can tell that by how other people, they talk about this in The Wizard of Oz. It's at the very end, the old wizard guy says, it's not how much you are loved, but how much you are loved by others. That's a real key and profound point, because very few people will ever remember what you say, but they will always remember how you made them feel. When you are in service to self, you might find yourself very isolated. Perhaps you're somebody who has trouble maintaining long-term friendships. Perhaps you have family members that are estranged. Perhaps you even have a grandchild that you've never met. These are indicators that you are someone in service to self. And that's a very hard thing to come to grips with when you look in the mirror and say, am I so focused on me that, I'm blaming others for my circumstances? It's this or that or the other, why I don't have my friends, I don't have connections, I don't have my family. That's a real tough thing for most people to say, yeah, I'm probably not walking in full alignment. I'm in service to self. And what you need to do is ask that question. If you're somebody who has maintained long-term friendships, even from like grade school all the way up to old age, if you're someone who is close to your children or your family members, and have wonderful relationship with grandkids, if you're lucky to live that long to have grandkids, and they're giving you hugs, now you know that you are in alignment to service to others, because it's very clear. It is very clear. And this is if you're saying you're on a spiritual journey and you are truly being honest with yourself, in order to spiritually expand, you do have to ask that question. Am I in service to self, or am I in service to others? And how you identify that is looking at your relationships, short-term and long-term. Where do you sit? And that will tell you. So if you find that you are somebody in service to self, that you don't have long-term friendships, that you are estranged from family members and friends, you might have to ask that tough question, even though you feel you are correct, even though you're convinced you are correct. The fact is, if you are estranged, you are not in harmony with God's source energy, because God's source energy keeps you in a loving, higher frequency where people naturally gravitate toward you, that you naturally have those interpersonal relationships that are healthy. So something to think about. Now, sometimes it's not your fault. Sometimes you are traumatized if you're somebody who is in service to others. It could be you are a child who is brutally abused. And that can also give that disconnection. The point I'm trying to make is, no matter where you are on the spectrum, if you are disconnected from family for whatever reason and friends, you can shift from a service to others, or service to self rather, service to self, to service to others. And that will begin to raise your frequency. These are the soul lessons that we need to learn while we are here. Now, when we do cross over, remember that the afterlife, the beginning stages of it, is a place where we rest, reflect, and assess, did we meet our goals in the life we just left? That is the thing that we need to look at. Excuse me. Reincarnation and soul contracts. And I'm just going to look at my notes real quick here because I want to make sure I don't miss anything. Dolores emphasized the concept of reincarnation, where souls return into the physical world to learn lessons and fulfill the soul contracts and evolve spiritually. Before reincarnating, the souls choose their life circumstances, relationships, and challenges to aid in their growth. So that's where it can get really tough. Some of you would probably argue, I did not ask to have this hard of a life. But in some respect, when we're doing the past life regressions, we will see often a common thread. Well, I chose this because I needed to learn this thing. And if I haven't learned this thing, it's going to present itself until I learn this thing in this life or my next life. So, or you can break the soul contract. If there's something that you feel like you're done with, you can break the contract and say, you know what? I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I don't want to do it anymore. You always have free will. And you assess that on the other side in your pre-birth planning and after you leave this life. The other thing that Dolores talks about in the afterlife is that there is no judgment or hell. And we talked about that in my previous video. Cannon's findings do suggest that there is no eternal punishment. And I've not found that either. I have not found that in any of the regressions I've ever done. Everybody judges themselves, and that really mirrors well with the near-death experiences. Now, for us, when we're doing QHHT, we're not doing a near-death experience because near-death means we go up to a certain point and we don't go beyond it. When we're doing our work, we're going into the place where you actually died and then you came back. And Dolores Cannon, if she's looking to find out what is causing phobias, for example, and we're going to use that for example because I had a client with, I had a couple of clients with two extreme phobias. And I took them into the place where that was the source of the phobia. That's the important question. What is the source of the phobia? And as we dissected, I'll give you my first example. I had a lady come to me that was a public speaker. And she was having trouble getting in front of people to speak. Even though this was her job, her career was to be a presenter of some type. And she had to be engaging. But yet, every time she did it, it got worse. The energy built. The anxiety went up, went up, went up, went up. She got to the point where she goes, I don't know that I can make a living because this is all I've ever done. And now I'm getting to the point where I have so much fear of being in front of people. I just cannot do it. I need to know what is going on with myself. So we went ahead and we did the regression. And she took me someplace very interesting. She went to a prior lifetime where she was a soldier, male, in Napoleon Bonaparte's wars. And I think they were fighting Spain. I had her describe what she looked like. So she looked down, she described her uniform, and I said, who are you fighting? And I think she said Spain, but I'm pretty sure it was Spain. And I said, okay, so what is your job? What are you doing? Well, she was in charge of the cannon. Apparently the cannon had to have like a team of people to fire it. And she was in charge. She's barking orders. And I said, so how are you feeling in this time? And she said, I am homesick. I want to go home. I hate war. I don't want to be here. And I'm longing for my family. I just want to go home. My home is safe. I thought that was interesting because here she is in battle and she's thinking about home and where it's safe. And here, reflecting back as I'm sitting in the seat in the regression itself, that's sort of ticking in the back of my mind. Is this a source that's causing her that's impossible for her to be in front of people? Because if you think about what she's doing, she's at a cannon, she's barking orders to fire it, and then in front of her is a mass wall of people. Because if you know anything about 18th century warfare, they stood in massive columns and blocks. So she is perceiving this mass of people in front of her. And I said, okay, so what happens next? She said she's hit by an incoming artillery shell. So something explodes and there's shrapnel and it takes her out. She goes, I'm here and then I'm there. She didn't. I said, is there any pain involved? Because as we look at this, we look at it from a disinterested point of view. So that if there's any pain available or any trauma available, we're just the observer of the event without the tie of the pain or the emotion. That's key because you can get a lot more information that way than taking people through trauma. But she said, I was here and now I'm there. And so she transitioned. I said, okay, is this the root, the source of your anxiety that keeps growing? And she said, yes, this is it. I said, does it serve you? No, it doesn't serve me. Are you ready to let it go? Yes, I'm ready to let it go. And I asked the subconscious mind to go ahead and allow it to leave the mind, body, spirit, and soul complex, that multidimensional self. So it was no longer anywhere in her. I did not want to take that energy just out of the physical body or just out of the mind. I wanted to, wherever it is presenting itself, in the physical body, in the mind, in the spirit or soul, I wanted to all go. Well, when she got up, she felt a whole lot lighter. And the next week when she went to work, she had no fear of being in front of people. In fact, she enjoyed her job. It was fabulous. Now, I have, for instance, of another person that I took him through the death experience. This is a person that was driving from, I believe it was Louisiana to Indiana. I believe it was either I think it was in the early 60s. I think it was either early or mid 60s. And it's Memorial Day weekend. And he's driving up to meet with his fiance that's ironically in Indianapolis. And this is where he's from. And so as he's driving up, he notices that he's getting sandwiched between the guardrail on I-65 and a semi-truck. And all of a sudden, the truck goes over the guardrail, but there's no land. The guardrail's there because there's a bit of a gully or something, but anyway, it's a drop. And so he was very afraid of heights. And so the car goes over. I think it might have been another interstate. I don't know. But at any rate, the truck goes over. And he exits before his body hits the ground. But he's so desperate to see his fiance. He's like, where do I go? What do I do? Where do I go? What do I do? What happened? And he tries like crazy to find some place. And finally, eventually, he ends up getting born again or taking over the body of a baby. It was really fascinating how that all played out. But here's a situation where he didn't plan to come out and learn a lesson. This is somebody that jumped from one life to another. And then, of course, in that jumping, he was still experiencing the trauma of that accident, of being in a high place and then rolling over. So, yeah, it was pretty scary. That was fascinating. But, after that, he didn't have any trouble with heights whatsoever. Now, some may argue there's no such thing as past lives, and that's for you all to figure out if it fits for you or not. I believe in them just because I do this every day, and I'm a witness to a lot of things. But just place it in the context that makes sense for you. This is not about proving one thing or another. If the mind is giving you a narrative, the important thing is to recognize what the narrative is, whether it's just a metaphor, a dream, or something, or if it's truly a past life. The mind needs to recognize it, come to peace with it, and allow it to go. And that's where the healing talks about. So anyway, my next list, what Dolores talks about in life after death. She says eternal connection and love. And that's the part that I really love. She did talk a lot about how family members, if they have a good connection, can stay connected from lifetime to lifetime to lifetime. So your soul family truly is. It can be. Now, if you've got some jerk mom or dad that you don't want to ever see again, You don't have to incarnate with them again. It's entirely up to you. In fact, maybe that's not even part of your soul family. Maybe you're with another soul family. But what's important to know that when you cross over into the other side, the people that loved you in this life in physical form are going to be truly waiting for you on the other side. And then you all get to, hang together, enjoy each other's company, and then decide at some point, hey, we're going to go back because there's more that we can learn. So then you kind of get all huddled up there and you begin to start to say, well, how are we going to do this? Are you going to be mom this time, or am I going to be mom this time? Are you going to play, whatever role? And so you begin to decide that in your pre-birth plan. We talk about that quite a lot. Now, Dolores Cannon, she was uncovering deep spiritual truths. And I say that from a standpoint, it's not something that was indoctrinated to her. In fact, it sort of was surprising to her because that's not how she grew up. So some of the truths that she was looking at is that common thread between people from around the world saying the same thing, and they don't even know each other. And they may say somebody comes in with a strong particular faith in something, and then when they do the regression, they're shocked that they say that their religion doesn't really fit with what they knew and saw on the other side. When you're dealing with consciousness, it truly is miraculous. The things that you can uncover, the stories that you can uncover. And if you have a fear, it could be a past life energy that sort of stuck with you. I had one client that went from lifetime to lifetime to lifetime, constantly dealing with neck problems. She had a lot of neck problems, but from several lifetimes, she kept going back to neck problems. So every life that we would look at, it would go back as well. She had neck problems. I go, good Lord, where's the root of the neck problems? Well, it turned out that this person was an executioner. And the reason she had neck problems or constantly, and I can't get into too many details, but she constantly had neck problems because she wanted to be reminded that she could not be an executioner again. And her soul was really tormented by that. So we started to peel that away. It's a real tough thing to examine yourself and find out you were an executioner in like the 1500s. So you can imagine we're talking using the axe and the sword. But it was a situation where this person, if they did not do as they were told, they were going to not only lose their own life, which this person would have done, but it would have cost the lives of her family members. And that's what she couldn't get over. She could not put her being a man at the time, the wife and the children in that situation. So begrudgingly, she did not want to do it, but it was how she had to go forward to keep her family alive. But she did not forgive herself. And she always wanted to be reminded to try to make different choices so she did not end up ever being an executioner again. So fascinating stuff, really. So Dolores has a really good book. It's called Between Death and Life, and also The Convoluted Universe. I'll leave a link in the description box below so you can go in, click those, and pick up some of her books. I read them and I reread them, and I'm still surprised today, after the many times I've gone through it. I will always pick up something new that I didn't know before. I love working in consciousness. So if you are somebody looking for a QHHT session or energy healing, please look me up at sallyknop.com, also linked in the description box below. I hope you enjoyed this little conversation, and I will be putting up more like videos soon that talks about all kinds of miracles and how you can apply these techniques at home and discover your own superhuman. Thanks for watching.